Since you have played in so many things, is there a Coward style, or sort of do you have to adapt to the sort of rigors of his particularly well-written plays? Is there any style of playing Coward that you?
Well, interestingly enough, the only other time that I got to be involved in a Coward play was Private Lives, which I did at the age of 18 for the Lux Radio Theatre, and I played Sybil with Greer Garson and Walter Pidgeon, and I forget who the fourth member was, but that's the only time. And of course this was radio, but I have never done a Coward play on stage professionally. It's never come up.
And what's the
the vortex obviously was always sort of lurking somewhere in my history, but I never got a chance to do it. It's sort of interesting as I'm working now with Rupert, who made a great success in that.
Right, and who was wonderful in your production. I think.
He is, isn't he?
Yeah,
he really is extraordinary.
But and you play Madame Arcati, who was a sort of whirlwind of a medium, and I wanted to know if you could talk a little bit about the challenges of just performing Coward.
Well, certainly it helps to, it really does help to have some English background in your makeup. I mean, I can see for an American it would be very difficult, and every member of our cast except for Deborah Rush has English antecedents.
In what sense, though?
It's something to do with the rhythm of the speech, the style, the verbiage, anything you want to say about the language. Coward is fairly unique in his use and his obviously enjoyment of that sort of level of English society, which he was obviously very wanting to be part of, was not born into.
Well said.
And yet wanted to be that kind of a gentleman, you know.
I call it the talentocracy.
Well, that's a good word for it, you know. And as a writer and as a performer himself, it's not surprising that he relished being part of it. Certainly he played the roles himself, he wrote the roles for himself, and yet he really didn't come from that strata of society at all.
No, I know. I'm interested that you said he's interested in that language, because it does require a certain level of not just eloquence but articulation, which is sort of which is lost, I think, in the American method acting. If you mean, they sort of approximate the language, where everything in Coward is crisp and exact, so exact.
It's all about style and manners. It's manners. The fact that we keep talking about each other in a very formal sense, Mr. Condamine, Mrs. Condamine, over and over and over again. We never just talk. It's always we're making a statement. We're always on guard, as it were.
But we use the word manners. But of course, what Coward is expert at doing is they're really comedies of bad manners, and Madame Arcati is a perfect example, because she's I can't remember what his word for her dress was, but I think it's brutish or something like that. She's very there's a word for it when she comes on, because she's certainly not elegant. She's meant to telegraph a certain kind of eccentricity.
Yes. Well, he's quite specific in his description of her in the first place, and I was interested because it seemed to me, and I have never seen, to my knowledge, I've never seen, excuse me, I've never seen Blithe Spirit, and I'll believe it or not, but by some chance, I think I was in Ireland at the time for many years, you know, before I came back to New York. I missed seeing all of the various productions.
Lucky, in a way.
Yeah, well, listen. I've always never wanted to see the previous person who played the role if I'm recreating a part.
Absolutely.
Because then these pieces cling to you, and you could try and get away from them, and I bet you remember them, the memory, you know.
Sure.
So as far as I was concerned, I always felt, on reading it and on his initial description in his little preamble to the play, that she was a rather outre, as we say in England.
That's right.
she was a woman who produced herself, her clothes, her jewelry. It was her idea of how she wanted to be, you know. And I just went with that. And Marty Bacaldina certainly went along with it. And so did Michael. So, and yet every picture I've ever seen, I've seen ladies in shirt waists, white shirts and long skirts, and have no bohemian aspects to them at all.
And can I ask, it's a wonderful, Madame Arcati is different than the other characters who all have secrets and are hiding things from each other. But Madame Arcati is, to a certain extent, without irony. She's totally there and believing in her powers and this connection with her contact in the other world, Daphne, who loves Irving Berlin. And so, which is just really droll. And these plays never, they're so well written that they never date, really. That's why they're so popular. But I'm interested, even though you know the play well, and when you get it up, are there things in the play that surprise you in the part? What?
Plot-wise, there are certain aspects that puzzle me sometimes. I mean, I'm surprised, for instance, the little maid who is the one who is psychic and who indeed brought on this manifestation.
This poltergeist.
This poltergeist, indeed. The fact that she screams when the ghost is in the room turning the gramophone on and off, and and she's there, and she thinks she's turned it off, and then she turns around to do something, and then it, what's her name, turns it on, and she turns around and screams and runs out of the room. I say to myself, well, why couldn't she have seen her? Why wasn't she aware? Because she is psychic. And things, I mean, those are silly little things. Well, there are lots of holes in the plot, actually. But you know what I've decided? I think that Coward, in this instance, really wrote the first sitcom. This is a situation comedy.
Well, it's sort of like Topper, only for keeps.
Yes, exactly. And it was something that was written in the 30s, but in this instance, because of the convoluted plot line of it all and so on, it really is very, very accessible for young people who come to the theatre, sit there, and absolutely roll in their seats. They love it because you establish, the situation, and then you have the payoff, and you have the situation and the payoff, and they go back and forth, and the more nattering and bashing.
I know, and I think it says something about Coward's literary expertise, that the play is not short, and yet you sit in it and go with it and are drawn into its argument, increasingly, and the sort of. He brings so many surprises.
Well, he's so sincere. I mean, Ruth, for goodness sakes, is so outraged, and she's so put upon, and she's
it's great.
And it's great. And Jane is extraordinarily good in it.
So I wondered, since I have you here, of this sort of many things that you've done on Broadway, what some of your happiest memories are of performing? I mean, are there any that stand out for you?
Well, I'll tell you, the thing about me is really I'm a comedian, I really am. And therefore the happiest moments, I think, were in Sweeney Todd, because that, for the very first time, I could let it all hang out. Here was this ridiculous, rather unbelievably naive little woman who was mad about Sweeney Todd, and who would have done anything in the world for him, but was totally, incapable of seeing right or wrong, and went along with anything he suggested just to stay in with him, And what she did, and how she let herself go, and how she got to dance and carry on and fool around and do all that wonderful kind of thing. It was so gritty and wonderfully warm, because the audience just loved it. They were so relieved during the phases of the show, which were so dark, that I could bring around that.
What are the challenges in singing a Sondheim song? There must be
huge.
Talk to me about that.
Huge, yes. Well, I mean, I really had to go back to the drawing board as far as my singing was concerned.
In what way?
I had to learn how to use breath and how to support my voice and not to tire it, and to be able to sing the rangy songs that I was, required in that. Because actually I had never used my head voice, for instance, in all of the other musicals I had done. Never did, except just briefly, kind of coming off it occasionally. But in Sweeney Todd I had to, and I always remember coming out of an elevator at Barbara Matera's couturier shop, who makes all the costumes, and this great woman, singer, and isn't it awful, I can't remember her name, but she looked at me and she said, diva,
Yeah.
And to me that was such a compliment, because it didn't occur to me that I would be considered a singing singer.
Right. Did Sondheim coach you with the words and stuff?
No.
You
Hal Prince insisted that we learn the score before we came to the first rehearsal, and so I went off to my apartment with a pianist, which they provided, and a new Yamaha piano, and I worked for 3 weeks, and I learned the score. And also learned to be able to sing it. Prior to doing that, I had had a few little lessons of how to support tone and also oiling up the works, because the voice was there, I just had never used it, that was all.
Really?
Yeah.
To bring you back to being on the boards now, I mean, are you sort of, is the shingle out? Are you going to go on just performing as much as you...
Well, quite honestly, my career has been a lot of sort of happenstances. It really has. I have so seldom sought out roles to play. I haven't... they just sort of come, and if there's something I think would be fun to have a crack at, I'll get up and do it.
Yeah.
And that was the case with this. I mean, you
have a lot of fun out there.
Yeah, you bet I do. I mean, this particular role is certainly a reason to get out of bed in the morning,